So welcome back, everybody. Today, you hear folks talk a lot about synchronicities, predictive slash projective programming, conception, deception, inception, etc., especially truth, conspiracy, and independent media. And most folks realize that these things do affect the physical world through some sort of manipulation, and that things are much more connected than our cultures, media, and sciences seem to suggest. Today we'll use the time, talents, and honest insight of Tom Barnett to parse through one of the foundational threads connecting everything. Tom recently emerged as a teacher for not only those who just woke up and are trying to figure out where they are, but for anyone with an eternal and honest curiosity about this realm we currently inhabit. If you've ever heard even just a couple of minutes of him speak, you'll know that he has seen through the veil of reductionism and is not a fan of this supplemental and compartmentalized way of thinking. The whack-a-mole philosophy of expending great amounts of energy, years, and sacrifice trying to study and understand and improve one aspect of a system while ignoring other aspects and sometimes even denying that a system as a whole even exists. So today we're going to find out if we can get Tom to zoom his metaphysical lens even further out than usual and delve into the fundamental fabric entangling the mental and physical worlds we call language to illustrate the connectedness of existence in such a way as to aid listeners in building their own comprehensive foundations so as to manifest their own freedom and knowing and usher love, abundance, and prosperity into the world. So making more than a blip, not just handing out tips for this or that, whose process is well beyond the simple tit for tat. A man who lives to give and gives to live, one who teaches without withholding, asks for nothing, listening and questioning rather than judging and telling, and certainly not yelling. A man of substance, heart, embodying a form of leadership so sorely needed these days, the form which empowers people to lead themselves. With grateful hearts, we welcome and thank the truly holistic man, Tom Barnett, for joining the conversation on land. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Damon. It's probably the best introduction I've ever had.
Thank you. How are you doing today, Tom? You've been, how's Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good. Love the land here. It's, yeah, I can never complain. That's for sure. We have probably the worst government in the world, but it's, the land's amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I heard you were out at, I heard you say you were going to be attending something at Ayers Rock the other day. Did you go?
Yeah.
How was it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't by choice. I wouldn't be going out there just because I want to go out there, but I got invited to speak at a conference called Cosmic Consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tend to follow I just tend to follow the little signs and the invites and things. So I just felt it was something maybe somewhere I'm meant to be, and I got the invite, so I've accepted to go. Yeah, should
Yeah,
be
I mean,
exciting.
sound pretty awesome. Cool, cool.
Yeah,
Well, I know we'll get to talk about Australia a little bit when we dive into the language and offers. So I just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction for what I wanted to talk about with you.
hmm
And just to clarify, so this is something, last time we spoke, I know I mentioned that law was one of my favorite lines of research. And this presents a fitting illustration for this discussion because I failed to elaborate further as to what I meant. In fact, at the time, I didn't really know what I meant either. So, because I can tell you with certainty, I'm definitely not so twisted that I enjoy looking through volumes of dull, confusing, and deceptive legalese and technical writing. No,
yeah,
what happened is that something actually clicked. So looking at law led me to further dive into the nature of language itself and the nature, foundation, roots, and philosophy of language is what led me to a lot of deep truths about both myself and the fabric of reality. I was wondering, now that I've expanded a little bit with my definition of what I meant with the law, if you went through the same sort of things when you were searching and learning about the law yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I felt a level of frustration because it's not an area. It's actually not an area of interest for me. I learned it out of necessity
Hmm.
because I just knew that there was so much wrong with this oppressive. I felt like a slave. I felt like a slave from a young age, and people kept saying, "Oh no, we live in a democratic society and a free society." And I'm just thinking, but we don't, because I just keep seeing that that's not the case. So I just dug because I knew that that was wrong, not because I had an enjoyment. I still actually don't like it. The other reason I like to share it is because I think if it's one of those things that if more people knew, then we wouldn't be living in the same world. But certainly the language side of it is a big part of it. Like you said, just decoding some of the misinformation. Like we think we're saying one thing, but the reality in a legal sense, we're probably saying the opposite. We're probably incriminating ourselves or giving our power away when we just think we're using the language that we grow up in. But there's a like a complementary language, the legalese, that it literally could mean the complete opposite, and we're babbling in our language, and therefore we're deemed incompetent, and therefore we're deemed not able to govern ourselves. Therefore, we need governments and rules and laws and prisons and fines and everything else.
Yeah, and not just with like, not just legalese, and even like as you're trying to keep abreast of what's going on in the world, and you see statements come out of public officials or whatever, and they say things. It means one thing in conversation, it means another thing in legalese, and it means another thing as they're talking publicly but coded.
Yeah,
And a good example I like to use is the word public health. Like, what do people, like regular people, think that means in regular conversation? They probably think it means like just the health and well-being of each individual person, as then like a whole, whether it's like a city or a state or whatever, when in reality, if you want to dissect it, and certainly open for debate, but I'm definitely of the mind that public health means public as in like the public institution of whatever it is, usually a government or a health department or whatever, the laws and policies. So that public health and how well they're doing. So when they say such and such is threatening the public health, to me, it usually means such and such is threatening them. So, and what do you think about
yeah,
that?
you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It's them and their agenda. It threatens their agenda because they would actually like it if the population decreased by a certain amount, because it's easier to control then. And so you're right. It's like the health of them, and everything is coded. Anything that anybody says who is in front of a television camera, for example, like politicians, newsreaders, just anyone in that kind of realm, movie stars, they're all speaking in some form of code. So they're saying one thing, and the public kind of, I guess they take it in as the way it's being said. But the astute listener is always going to be looking for the what's between the lines, what's the underlying message that they're giving, because it's usually, like you said, quite different. And the funny thing about English is it's the last language that was developed by the legal profession, and it's only about 1,000 years old. And being the last language is the most heavily controlled. It's the most heavily coded, and it is literally just a language, a control mechanism. And that's one of the reasons that they want English to be the universal language, is because it is the most. It's just the
It's built
most
for it.
indoctrinated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly. And so yeah, before we get going too far, since we're talking about language, is just this is part of learning language and working through parsing through things, is to first off, just you and me, but also for anyone else listening, is to make sure that we're on the same page. So we should probably define what we mean by language, and I'll give you a quick and easy definition
Yeah.
and how I'm using it. By language, I mean words or articulate sounds used to communicate thoughts. And if you want to pull a little more detail out of Webster's 1828, which is, by the way, probably my favorite, just like all around dictionary, not necessarily law dictionary or anything, but This says when two or more persons customarily annex the same sounds to the same ideas, the expression of these sounds by one person communicates his ideas to another. And then lastly, in a wider sense, it's any manner of expression, and it can be more than just sounds or the written word. It could be art, anything. So it's pretty broad. Would you add anything else to that?
No, it's that's basically all it means to me. It's
Yeah.
yeah, pretty.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's just a matter of practice to make sure you're on the same page, and we'll get we'll get to that. So, like you said, language is important, and it's always been really at the foundation of control, and especially English. I mean, I think there's different ways, like terms for it, but it's like the common vulgate, like vulgar. So the vulgar common. I've seen that in a few pretty old family Bibles referring to it as that. But anyway, so in 2020, it's the year in which we are watching literally every aspect of the societies we live in unravel. A year which the controlling classes could not be more open and upfront about their intentions and offers and the direction that they want to take us after this great reset. And so, what a better way to use language to control a herd than to merely just offer to them where you want them to go and then sit back and watch them stampede in that direction. I know Tom talks about offers a lot. And so, what do you think, Tom? Have I oversimplified that, or is that really just how it works? They just sit back.
Yeah, and it's always the simplest way of explaining something is usually the best way. So I think you did a good job. Can't really improve that.
Yeah, so, well, for anybody who may not have ever heard you talk about offers, it, Tom's, it's just really the best. It's connected me so well with understanding how it works, the way Tom explains it, and they put an offer out at, say, like a movie, and, well, I'll let you explain it, Tom. You're the one.
Okay, so we're looking at, because we're in commerce, we the way commerce works is that you can't force anything on anybody. There's no such, if a forced contract is a null and void contract, for example. So if I said to you, I want to come in and take all of your herbs there that you got behind you, that's an offer. So I can't just come in and take it. You can accept, you can conditionally accept, you can decline, or you can remain silent, or you can put in a counter offer or negotiate. Well, you can come and take them, but it's going to be $500 for the lot. You can't just come and take it, or whatever it is. So we're being offered all the time. We want to depopulate you guys, or we want to vaccinate everybody, or we want to close borders, or make you get a chip, or take away your driver's license, or whatever else. Those are offers. And what people do, though, is they take them as that's set in stone now. So if the government comes out and says, well, look, we're going to take away your ability to drive a car on the highways. And then everybody starts going, oh, no, oh, my God, the government's doing this. Oh, we can't drive anymore, right? What have they done? Well, they've just accepted, and they've taken what was an offer and made it the reality, because they've now spoken it out as a reality. They're saying we are getting our rights taken away. That's what they're doing. So the government didn't do it, the people did. However, what the people can do is go, okay, well, that's an interesting offer. I'll conditionally accept that offer upon the conditions that you can show me that you have the right to take away, or the authority to take away my right to travel. Well, that's the first one. That's the only one that you really need.
Yeah.
But you can put conditions in that they need to abide by. Otherwise, that offer does not stand, because I can't come in and just take your herbs. That's theft. That's a crime. I can't just take it. There has to be a meeting of the minds. Okay, we have to have like a mutual agreement, equitable terms. There has to be, there just has to be things set out. There has to be an escape clause if it's a contract. An agreement becomes a contract if there's money involved. If I buy those off you, if I'm paying you, that's consideration. So that turns an agreement into a contract. But first of all, the first thing that has to do is you have to accept. Now, in commerce, the way we deal with law, there's four ways you can go about handling an offer. The first two ways are honorable, and the second two are dishonorable. Dishonor in commerce is not the way you want to go. You always want to remain in honor when you're dealing in commerce. So those two ways that you can remain honorable is to fully accept. You can do a full acceptance. So that means I make you an offer and you just go, yep, happy with that. That's what people are doing when the government says we're going to take away your right to do this, or we're going to make you take this vaccine or whatever. People just, by saying, oh no, the government wants to do this. Well, actually, that's not true. A full acceptance is everybody just going, okay, that's fine, you do that. That's a full acceptance. Now you can accept three ways. You can verbally agree, you can sign that you agree, or you can pay money. So if there's an offer like a fine, like a claim of damages or fine or whatever, and you pay it, you've accepted it. Mm-hmm. You can sign something to say you've accepted, or you can verbally say, yeah, no, I accept that. They're the three ways you can accept.
Yeah, and it's like there's different ways of signing too. There's a blind endorsement, and then you can negotiate it when you have an instrument and you negotiate it and sign it in a certain way. And then there's the other, like in this context, when they're making society-wide offers like this, is the tacit acceptance of just, you have the chance to change it, and you go along with it anyway. So you don't say anything, you don't do any pushback. So that's the tacit acceptance.
So so you've got your full acceptance, which is just, yep, that's fine. You've got conditional acceptance, which is, well, that's fine. You can take away my right to travel, or you can vaccinate me or whatever, on the condition that. So you're not disagreeing. You're saying that's fine, but only if you can meet these conditions. That's a form of negotiation. Mm-hmm. So then the last two are silence, and silence is acquiescence or assent. And that just means that you, by not saying anything, you unconsciously or tacitly or you agree. You agree mm-hmm. because you remain silent and you didn't say anything either way. So that's an agreement, and that's dishonoring commerce to just remain silent. And then the last one is to argue. That's the worst. So that's saying, no way, I'm not doing that. You can't do that. I'm not doing that. That's arguing, which is kind of belligerence, and that's the dishonorable way in commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way to tie it into what they're doing now when they say that and how they're using language against you is, first off, they don't add the word offer, right? And so people have to really, and they also don't teach anyone how to operate in commerce, even though those are the rules that they're abiding by, is the rules of commerce. So first off, they don't tell you it's an offer. Second off, if you did realize it was an offer, you don't understand what they're looking for until you start diving deep into language and then also the rules of commerce. And so that's, exactly why we're having these conversations like this, because, like I said, they've told us, everyone, that they want to do a great reset, or they are doing the great reset. It's already, taken place. It's halfway done. I don't think there's any turning back. I don't think there was any turning back after like April. But so they've told everyone they're doing the great reset, and they've made all these offers on what they want the great reset to look like. Now it's up to us to accept it, or conditionally accept it, or to build something else, really. I don't really know where that fits in the commerce thing, but maybe you could answer that. So if we say they're making these offers that they want everybody to have an immunity passport for one, and blah blah blah, do this to get through customs and airports, and that's their offer, and we then decide to just build our own system, our own way of travel. Where would that fall in the commerce, and how would people go about that honorably? How would they go about this honorably?
Yeah, so it's kind of in a different realm. So that's the private realm. The private realm is where you are a man or a woman and you have rights. No one can take those away. So you technically, if you've reserved your rights and you've reclaimed your status as a living man or woman, then technically you don't even have to accept or not accept or whatever any of their offers, because it only applies to persons and people in a public realm. Right. So that ability to travel, for example, and you're talking about the passport, the immunity passport, that applies to persons because travel in the public realm is a benefit and a privilege. So that's what slaves have. Slaves have benefits and privileges, which can be taken away at any time, and you can have statutory penalties imposed on you if you violate the codes in the statutory rules, which only apply to persons. So if you have reserved your rights and reclaimed your status as a living man or woman, two ways you do that is one, you attain your certificate of live birth. That's different to a birth certificate. The birth certificate is the instrument that essentially connects you to your entity, your dead thing, your corporate fiction, which is your name in all caps that's made out when you get a birth certificate. You're registered to the state. However, before the birth certificate is produced, the document that gives rise to the birth certificate is called the Certificate of Live Birth or the Certificate of Birth. Now, that is the certificate that is signed by the hospital and your parent, usually the mother, I think. And it says it has your name on it, and then there's a section that says, "Is the newborn stillborn or living?" And then obviously, if there was a baby that was stillborn, it would be circled stillborn and then filed away as that was a stillborn baby. But if you're living, it'll be circled living. So that is the evidence that you are a living being. Then what happens is that source document is then used to create the birth certificate. And then we are told to then use that as our form of identification when we take out a passport or a driver's license or get our state identification. And that is essentially us becoming a ward of the state and accepting benefits and privileges in the public realm as a slave. So you want to use your source document. So the first thing is to get your source document. If you can't get a source document, you can do that by way of affidavit and file affidavits. And if they're unrebutted for you being a living man or a woman, then technically you are a living man or woman. So you can use that. And then you want to start signing your passport and driver's license if you hold those, all rights reserved. And by doing that, by default, you're a man or a woman with rights, because a slave can't reserve their rights. They have no rights. Only a man and a woman have rights. Therefore, if you reserve your rights, technically by default, you're a living being. So those two things can help in that regard.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying there is you don't want to use their benefits and privileges that they're offering you, and you need to stay in the private. And to effectively be in the private, you do need some paperwork to back it up, although I've heard some wordsmiths that they may be able to hold their own. I don't know if you can do it without falling into any traps, but it's best to just have paperwork, proof, an affidavit.
It's part of it, but you're right, because that was the next thing I was going to say, is that just having, there's no such thing as like, this is my, this is my magic card, gets me everywhere, leave me alone. It doesn't exist, because people are always going to test you. It's part of the scriptures. You're always going to be tested, and those that test have the right to test you, because if you're just pretending, it's like all the scriptures talk about, you can't pretend. So if you don't really know who you are and you walk around with your source document and your all rights reserved passport, but you don't know who you are, people have a right to test you to find out if you do know who you are. And if you can't hold your position, then that can be an issue. It's not just a get out of jail free card. So you do need to learn how to speak, and you need to know how to not answer questions. You need to know how to hold people accountable, and there's just no doubt whatsoever that you are a creditor in the land of commerce and not a debtor who answers questions and who accepts offers and things like that. A creditor does not accept the offer. A creditor makes the offers.
Right. So this is why we're talking about language, is because that's, even if you have all the documentation and everything, you need to know who you are. You need to know the language that you're using, or else you're gonna fall into those traps. And why would a document mean anything about who you are if you didn't know first before you had that document? I mean, that's like lying. So this is why we're talking about the language, because that's really where people can get tripped up there. So move back to that example of traveling. obviously all the living men and women have the right to travel, and no one can take that away. And in fact, Tom mentioned it. You can ask them, well, what gives you the authority to take that away? And the point of that is nothing gives them the authority to take that away because they can't.
Yeah.
So anyway, so moving back to that example, and what Tom said is basically you need to know who you are and have documentation and stay in the private, and you can't use their benefits and privileges. And I wanted to point out, we don't really know what's going to happen as far as like, are you going to be able to use the airport if you're staying private and exercising all your rights? Because it may that I mean the airports may be a fixture of that public system, and that would be a benefit, and that would kind of screw everything up there. So I've just been
Really?
telling.
It's more the jurisdiction is what I'm talking about. You
Mm,
can still access that. That's no problem. But what happens is this one's a bit of a dicey one because on one hand, if that's a private company, it's like if imagine this is your office and you sell herbs, right? And you're a business, okay? So you can technically refuse me to buy your herbs for whatever reason,
mm-hmm.
but you can't discriminate. If I'm black, you can't say I'm not selling your herbs because you're black. Or if I'm in a wheelchair, you can't say no, I don't serve disabled people, right? You,
No.
you can't do that. But if I'm belligerent or if I'm I don't know, I'm just a shady character, you can refuse me entry to your store. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you get
Right.
you get the analogy. So they are a private company, which means that they can technically choose who they can and who they will and won't let on their airplanes,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't discriminate. And being not vaccinated is a discrimination issue. So
Right.
they can't say you're not coming on. They might say, well, you can't come on because you're a health threat. So then what would you do? If they say you're a health threat and you can't come on, what would you do
You
or
need to
say?
ask them to prove how you're a health threat.
Exactly. Because
Right.
they're making a claim now. And maxim of law says that he who makes the claim bears burden of proof. So if they're saying you're a health threat, you say, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. Do you have some evidence for that? No, we don't let people on the plane. No, I didn't ask what you do and don't let. I said, you just made a claim. Then
Mm-hmm.
don't let them take it away. Don't let them veer off into another thing. You say, no, 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 you made a claim. So for the second time, do you have some evidence that I'm a health risk? Look, sir, we don't, no, 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 I didn't ask for any of
Mm-hmm.
that. For the third and final time, you made a claim. I want to see your evidence that I'm a health threat. If you can't provide it, right, you're accepting that I'm not a health threat. And if you continue to suggest that I'm a health threat, I'm going to have to counterclaim you and sue you because you're making unfounded claims against me. So that's how you have to hold your position. They make a claim and you do not let them move one iota away from that part of it. You always come back to that. Let's not worry about that. No, I didn't ask you that question. I asked you this, and you keep coming back. And the last thing, if they just pig-headed about it, you say, look, I'm going to have to put in I'm going to have to sue you. I'm going to put in
Yeah.
a claim against you because you're making false claims against me. That's totally unlawful. That's a discrimination.
Yeah, and gonna actually have to do it. You can't make idle threats. You gotta hold your ground like that. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, so it's gonna be a bumpy road because people are gonna have to assert themselves and stand their ground, and some people might not be able to do that. So they're kind of sitting ducks, waiting for those of us who are ready to challenge it. And that's another maxim of law. If you let injustice happen willingly, then you're I need to look at exactly what that is, but you're part of it. You're part and parcel to it, and you're responsible for it if you are taking part in allowing stuff like that to happen.
yeah,
um but if so the airport thing, Tom, totally right, and I get it that they are private companies but operating in commerce, and they can't refuse and discriminate like that. So how about a better, not a better example, just another example, and where I was really kind of going with this is, so how about public schools? This is a good example because they've already been doing a lot of things that a lot of parents object to, what they're teaching, how they're teaching it, I mean, obviously it's a 12 years of indoctrination camp basically, so it's already a rough deal there. But we see uh, those at the top making offers and showing you exactly what they want to teach kids about. I mean, it's the stuff the UN was talking about, teaching kids about masturbation and stuff. It's just like, come on. So when they're making these offers and they're telling people outright all these things they're doing, they're gonna say they're gonna require vaccines and everything. That this, to me, what this is a sign of like, well, the system was already busted and broken to begin with, and now they've just, thrown it overboard over the waterfall, and it's time that we, the people living who are paying attention, make our own systems to take place of that, instead of just continuing along with the old system and continuing complaining about it and getting pushed over and having to do stuff. Why not put together your own schools? Like I heard you mention Bush schools, and those are great. I mean, do you see any? I mean, I don't see any other option for something like schools, because that is a public entity.
Yeah, well, so you still though you have the right to that's a fundamental right, is the right to education. So you can still do the same things, reserve your rights, put in conditional acceptances for them saying your kid can't come to school. And here, me and a friend of mine, we've got several people back into schools, and people getting their jobs back who got fired for not getting a flu vaccine and all that kind of stuff. So the
Yeah,
thing that people don't like is litigation. If they have a threat of litigation against them, like, we're going to sue you if you don't let the kid into school, then they'll let the kid into school. My problem is, I mean, if that's me, I don't want to put them into a school like that anyway.
that
Because if
exactly.
that's the mentality that's in there, why do I want to get them into that school? Like, for me,
Hmm.
I'd just rather go, well, hey, that's the best indication that I should be homeschooling my kid, or be forming a collective where it is like a bush school, like a private school,
Hmm.
a private as in outside of the system school. And, teach them real things, take them into the woods, show them how to find food, show them how to hunt, show them how to tie ropes and knots, and show them how to catch things, and show them how to show them the majesty of nature, and to develop like a real reverence for it, so that they're always connected to it. Whereas all these kids that go to school, other schools, they don't get a connection or a reverence to nature, so they can be very lost later in life. Real skills, teach them how to relate to each other and to build fire, and just skills, like, really
Right.
teach them, man, educate them.
Yeah, I mean that, like, just basically everything is completely inverted anyway. So like, it's not something that you want to do anyways. It's just kind of like the sign and the time to say, if you care about something like this, we should all build things together. And honestly, I know people are like scared of it, but when it comes down to it, that was a better life anyways, where you worked within the community, and you had small classes with the kids, and each man or woman had something to bring to them, to teach them, and they learned how to interact with nature, learn how to interact with the community. And you didn't have to either pay for a private school, or pay for babysitting, or face having to send them to a public school. And my last question for you, I want, before we move on from there. So you said a fundamental right is, the fundamental right to education, and if you're trying to, even after all the things that we just said, and you're still trying to keep your kids in a public school, and you said, well, I have the fundamental right to education, blah blah blah, and I'm the school district, and I say, well, can you prove that we're education? That's
Yeah,
my
right.
question to you. Prove that we're providing education, and I mean, I don't see anyone saying that, but it just came to mind when you're talking about the right
Well, they're
questions
not
and
providing
education.
education; they're providing indoctrination. So
Yeah.
it's more just the premise. I wouldn't be using that personally, but it's just the premise that they can't take away. So there's benefits and privileges, and there's entitlements. So education is an entitlement, and so is things like welfare. When governments formed, they forswore to protect their people. So getting welfare is not a benefit or a privilege; it's an entitlement. It's a different thing. You can't take away entitlements,
Mm-hmm.
such as education. So again, it's a discriminatory thing. If you choose not to vaccinate, you can't. Anything medical is discriminatory. Is a choice. There's never such thing as a mandatory medication. That's written into constitutions and laws and everything, case laws. So it becomes a discriminatory precinct when then you're saying you can't come to school because of your medical
Mm-hmm.
choices. Medical choices are freedoms like religious freedoms and political freedoms and things like that. It's like saying, oh, you vote, your family votes for Trump, you're not coming to school. Yeah, that won't happen. Or your family is Catholic, you're not coming to the school. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. So they can't discriminate based on those choices.
Well, I mean, so I see them putting offers out that they want to do this, and in order to do that, they would really have to have a whole new system from the ground up. New money, new everything, a new way of identification, and obviously that's what they want to do that with the Great Reset. So I mean, we're still good in that we're in the traditional system there with commerce, but to me, it's obvious that they're trying to, or they are setting up a new system that's not going to have any of these protections that we're talking about today, but it will be consensual for people to enter into, and you're going to have to consent and move into that. But that's the scary thing. if
Yeah.
if you had to get, if you got stuck in that, I mean, obviously don't do it, but um,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so anyway, so let's jump back into the language. I mean, still along the same lines, but I wanted to point out something here. By now, I think most people who are listening to people like Tom will know that basically, anytime that you're given a lie, you're also given the truth at the same time. And I'll never forget this quote from Laurel Airica, who is a poet whose prose alone breaks the spell of language. She's absolutely fantastic to listen to. It really opens your mind and see through the veil of some language, or language in general. But she said, in order to be effective, all lies have to be energetically wrapped in the truth.
Mm.
And after hearing that, and every single thing that I've looked into law wise and not law, but anything with news clippings, releases, public statements, all of that, if you really look and you read between the lines that Tom was talking about, whatever their yeah, the truth is there.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
It's the power of suggestion. So if I yeah, it's like this fundamental frequency that they're aware of, where they know that if they actually completely lie, they're violating a higher power or a higher law, and then they are subject to the consequences of violating those laws. But if they give these offers and they kind of put through lies, but it is wrapped in truth, then technically they're not violating higher laws. And so they'll always do it. They always hide their, and sometimes they don't even hide it. It's right there.
mm-hmm.
And they use suggestion. So it's almost like this shirt's blue, right? But if I just kept talking to you and convincing you that like there's no such thing as blue doesn't exist, and I'm wearing a red shirt, and I just keep putting that out there and putting that out there, then the masses generally will just accept that. And then somebody will go, oh, how's that guy with the blue shirt? And they'll go, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as blue, you idiot. You know? And that's how, but I'm clearly wearing a blue shirt. So it's like a lie wrapped in truth. And it's always there. It's if somebody's mind is open and they're not so reactive and indoctrinated, they're always just able to see. They hear or see an offer or anything come through, and they can just discern straight away where it is. Or yeah, so it's not, so for people that are tuned into that, then there aren't really lies being put forward as such, because it's always an element of, you can see the reality of it.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. You pointed out that it's you can't have a lie and an offer, because to make an offer you need to be honest about what you're offering to people. So if you're completely lying, you say, well, I'm offering you 10 pounds of gold for this, and you just give them 10 pounds of crap, like, you just lied. Like, but if you say, well, it's gold covered crap, and I mean, you can wrap it up, you can wrap the crap in gold. But and another thing that it'd be great to actually get your opinion on this, because I've read some of the maxims of law, and this makes a lot of sense to me, is that one of them is, and so this is applied to the people making the offers. So one of the maxims of law is, he who accepts liability has credibility, or you don't have credibility without liability. So if you're not taking any liability, you have no credibility. And in effect, you have the principles of these organizations, and I'll just use this as an example. This is just like stuck out to me for this throughout this whole thing, is a certain government healthcare principal, director level, said, oh, well, I wear masks because I believe they'll be effective and I believe they'll work. So, Tom, what did I just say?
Well, you've not said that it's worked. You've said that you believe it works. It's the same as the CDC. They say we believe such and such about infectious diseases, about viruses. It's like, well, that's like me saying, hey, Ammon, how does how does it feel having my finger tickling the back of your neck? And you're like, what are you talking about? And I say, well, I believe that I'm tickling the back of your neck right now. And it's kind of like, I'm not, but I believe I am. But beliefs aren't reality, and hearsay is not evidence. So you can't just rely on a belief about anything. You're actually saying, by me saying that I believe that I'm doing such and such, I'm telling you that I'm not doing it.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was my point. And when he says, I believe, and he's saying him specifically, not his organization, that he believes something will work, he's saying it doesn't work because he holds the liability. And in order to make a credible statement, I mean, he has to hold the liability. So if he was to say it works when he knows it doesn't, he's lying and he's getting himself in trouble. And that's why they say things like that. I believe it'll work. That literally means it doesn't work. He's just trying to get people to do something. And so, moving on to the next bit here. So we had another maxim. Well, we had just mentioned how the truth, or the lies, are always wrapped in the truth, and there's another maxim here, and this wraps up with the consent in the offers, is, let him who wishes himself to be deceived be deceived. But for those, and this is, I just read that, and this is my words now, but for those who choose not to be deceived, those who intend to manifest their own freedom and abundance, I see all of this stuff, everything happening now, as actually an incredible blessing, because even those who have been paying attention to the state of the world the last few years, which we've been talking about, the schools going to hell and back and all of that, we've noticed what was happening, but it's so slow that, I mean, even me, I'll be the first to admit, I was complacent before all this. I was comfortable. I mean, I knew what I was doing with life wasn't exactly what I was meant to do or I wanted to do, but I was, depending on how you look at it, either taking my time or wasting my time. And now with all of this happening, now, no, I'm not wasting any time. I want to build what I want to build. And so it's an awful saying to say, let he who will be deceived. But the upside of that is really what we want to talk about, is what are we, like, this is a golden opportunity, because we'll never have another time where so many people are actually open to doing something about it. And it's time to build, and let's build. Tom. We're building, and you see people building.
Mhm.
Am I being a little insensitive, or should people be excited?
I'm excited.
I'm excited. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, I think it depends on a lot of what's going on. We don't have a lot of control over. It's kind of like it's been written for a long time that this is an era of change. Things were never going to be the same. The way things have been going has never been sustainable anyway, and that's by design. It was meant to break down at some point, and we're seeing that breakdown now. Then they disguise it in certain things, like they call it climate change or global warming, or they call it some financial thing, or they call it whatever. But all of those things are just, I don't know. They're all just like they're little.
They're
They're
half
just little stories
truths.
that run off
They're
just to
half
get people.
truths.
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking at what was always really going to occur, and from a higher level, then there's an understanding that you basically have chosen the life that you have, and the era that we're in, we chose before we got here. So there's even those that were very comfortable. They had no idea about the higher functionings of life. There's still some element of choosing to be here to experience it. So there's no one on earth right now this is going to be from a higher spiritual perspective. It's going to be a complete shock and surprise to them. Everybody is prepared on some level for a change. It's only the ego that doesn't like change. The ego likes things to be comfortable, doesn't want to change anything ever, doesn't want to ever be wrong, and whatever. But the higher self embraces change and embraces challenges and wants to always grow and progress. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm really excited about it partly because, well, I just am. I'm always looking
Yeah.
for the new adventure and what's going to be like. Even if there's like fire raining from the sky, it's like, oh, cool. That's like, what am I going to get out of this experience, and how do I handle this? And this is a challenge. How do I rise to this challenge? But that's exciting to me. The ego wants to be inside with the TV on and the air conditioner on and no fire outside. So it's just a different perspective, and people choose their own heaven and hell. And so people that are really fearful about what's going on, or not excited about it, or wish that it wasn't happening, is like aching for the way things used to be, then that's a self-inflicted pain. First of all, the way that things used to be was always shit. That's
Yeah.
why, people like me, just even from when we were kids, just knew it was wrong, just couldn't explain how or why. Took a few decades to figure it all out, but just knew that it wasn't right and could see the harm and the destruction being caused because of it. And so now we're seeing this kind of collapse starting to occur, and the opportunity for people to wake up and create something better. And it's awesome. Yeah, it's great. I don't think it's insensitive of you to think that.
Yeah. No. And I mean, even if I was totally wrong, what does it help to just be in fear the whole time? Anyways, it helps none. So like,
Mhm.
just it's
Yep.
you gotta sit down and do some meditating, soul searching, and you get over it or run or accept it. I don't know,
Yep.
but yeah,
Yep.
we're definitely going into. I mean, it's a reset, and where we go from there is what we choose, and
Yeah.
and being armed, realizing how language is used against us, and you just have perfect examples there, because when you say something like climate change, well, like when I was 18, I mean, that was something I was like, holy smokes, like this is important. And well, of course, like the earth and taking care of it is important, but like this whole thing, they take those words and you don't even, it's, they've completely co-opted it. So it's a total, I mean, psyop is what it is, and
Yeah.
it's misdirection, because that's not, of course people care about the earth, but that's not the goal of that agenda. It's just perfectly disguised.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah, so and getting down to the nitty gritty and language here, because let me actually, we'll pause. The reason, uh, trying to explain it clearly, the reason why language it's such a big deal is more than just language, but it's the best example of Do you know what influences are coming into your mind and trying to influence your ego, which is a whole nother topic, but what influences are coming at you from the way that language is being used, for just like that climate change example, to literally any and everything. There's influence coming from every single angle. That TV, the pictures, the language you've used since you've grown up. I mean, if you look at anyone who starts to learn a different language, or even just bits and pieces of it, or look at the etymology of the words, realizes like this word itself, a fiction, is boxing you in. So the reason why that's the reason why you need to really know language, but also know yourself and know what influence, who's trying to influence you to do what, right?
Yeah.
it's it's coming from every single angle. And so language itself, I do want to see what you think about this, because I know some would say that language shapes our perception of reality, and I would say it shapes reality itself, because, and this goes with the mindset and everything, because everything begins with a thought or a mental image. So these thoughts, like before we take action on anything, the thoughts and the concepts, images, they are created, or rather conceived or imagined in our own mind. So that, I mean, that's one of the gifts, uh, the divine gifts to man, is to be able to create something in their own mind, to conceive of something that there wasn't there before. And when I say man, another psyop, I mean mankind, like men and women. But
Yeah.
so that's one of our gifts, is to be able to conceive and to create something. And then thoughts can also be evoked, prompted by external stimuli. And if the meanings which we learn or are taught to ascribe to words in our language has a direct influence on our perceptions of, the items we see, we attribute that word, that fiction, to them. And then our perception is the lens we use to interpret the meaning and implications of external prompts and stimuli. And then we use that to inform our mental image. And then the mental image or thought we then manifest into the physical world through action, either creative or destructive. Then, if you follow that whole line of reasoning from the start to the end, language shapes the actual reality around us.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, it absolutely does, because it codes us in certain ways. So does music,
Mm-hmm.
light, water, sound. It all codes us, and and language. So language involves a cadence and a sound and tones. It's like there's a lot of different ways that it goes into us, as well as the way we're indoctrinated to learn the meanings of words. So it does most definitely shape the reality around us, because we that's what, like, the it's like what the Bible says. God said, let there be light, and there was light. And all that kind of thing. Like, we kind of speak our way into creating our reality in our world. And so yeah, absolutely. And what's important is that we need to address the fact that a lot of what we're creating is unconscious, because we're speaking without knowing what we're saying. So what we're creating is essentially creating it unconsciously. So the skill in becoming a self-realized human, man or woman,
Mm-hmm.
is that we just back up a sec, because human doesn't mean man or woman. Hue means monster.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
color.
so being a fully self-realized being, then you are very selective about what comes in, and then also what comes out. So you wouldn't be listening to top 40 pop on the radio. You wouldn't be watching the news. You won't be spending too much time in front of flickering screens. You won't you really become a master of what's coming in and going out. So therefore, what you are creating is coming from a better internal source and is a conscious creation because you are completely aware of what you are speaking out into the world with your words and your intentions.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what too with the absorbing. What kind of influence are you absorbing as well? Um,
Mm.
and if you're not conscious of the language and conscious of every single thing coming in, then you're creating unconsciously, like Tom said, and you could be creating fantastic things, but the people exploiting that our egos and that fact that we're not always conscious of what we're creating are not trying to get us to create fantastic things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and so you mentioned the ego, and I just have this. I was curious. So I'm not sure about this, but it seems to me that the language is connected to, like, having a language to use and to understand reality by is connected through the ego. And it's probably 100% impossible to imagine what life would be like if we never learned the language and how we would perceive and see everything around us. But I wonder if it's possible. Do you think if we didn't have language, would we not have an ego, or vice versa?
No, we would still have the ego. The interesting thing about language, I was talking to a friend about this last night. So the first is I was saying that I wish, wish just I don't wish anything different because we're what we have chosen and what we've experienced is all for a particular reason. So I don't wish anything was different. But if I had a choice of learning a new language and it was not English, I would learn something like Sanskrit because it's one of the most ancient languages and it was developed by listening to the frequency of nature. So if we use the word rock, for example, but their word for rock is the sound or the frequency that a rock emanates, so that it has an actual correlation to something in nature. And then with their language, it's very mathematical and scientific, and you can read a whole passage one way, and then you could read it back the other way, and it's also legible the other way. It's like a fantastically complex and beautiful language. And other language, like you hear French or Spanish or Italian, and if you don't understand what they're saying, it sounds musical. But you hear
Mm.
somebody speak in English, and if you don't understand what they're saying, it's in no way musical. It can sound very just boring or harsh or whatever. So language is it's not really associated to the ego, but it can program the ego. And then the other thing that I was saying to my friend is that um, when I was young, when I was in my probably actually early teens, I decided that language, we think, because I grew up in academics, right? So I thought we're very intelligent, very complex, we're the highest of everything. But then I just kept thinking, like, we miscommunicate so much. We have this language that we use all these fancy words and our vocabulary is supposed to increase all the time. And I'm like, but so many times we misunderstand each other. And then I was used to watch birds and I'd watch birds in different trees. And I'm like, they're just emanating tones. And there's no miscommunication, even between distant trees and stuff. They all go in the same direction. There's this communication that's just perfect. And I'm like, what if their communication is way more complex than ours? And it's just kind of like tonal. So then I thought, well, if light and sound code information, could you not hear a tone? And then because it's not linear, like I am talking now, you have to hear my whole sentence before you know what I'm saying. That's linear. And non-linear is just to hear a sound, and then in that sound, instantaneously, it contains an encyclopedia worth of information that you decode at once because you take in the sound and it's non-linear. You just inherently now understand everything in that tone in like instantly because it's coded in the sound. So then I thought, like, my ideal of a language is more of a tonal language that just has information coded within it, and then it's all instantaneously downloadable. It's not a construct of linearity. And then,
Mm.
funnily enough, I was watching Futurama years ago. And did you ever watch Futurama,
It's a
guys?
smart show, yeah. I mean, it
Yeah,
get you to think. I mean, that's Matt Groening, right?
Yeah, Freemasons and whatever. So,
Yeah.
so there's an episode where Fry becomes really intelligent. He learns how to play this instrument that's like only like masterful people can play, sort of like a flute. And as you play, it creates tones, and then the tones also create a visual
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
kind of holographic landscape. And that's exactly how I'd pictured a tonal language to be years ago when I was a teenager. And then I saw that and I was like, damn, like somebody's seen the same thing I have. There must be something in that. And so it kind of makes me think, and because they're Freemasons, they know about this hidden information, makes me think that we do have that ability in our DNA that's just not activated at the moment. I think we do have the ability to communicate well beyond this linear construct of a language that we use and that we so often misuse. Like you've been saying, we misuse it because we often create something that we don't intentionally want to create, and we don't understand what we're saying half the time, and we incriminate ourselves half the time in a legal sense. So I really do think that there is a language embedded in us that is universal, and that we can, yeah, we just have to find it. We have to,
Tune into it,
yeah,
I think, because uh, and it's right along the same lines as that. So one of the fundamental natural laws is that like all is vibration, and so you see vibration, you hear vibration. It's all just frequencies on the scale. So exactly what you were saying, and David Icke says this, and that's a fantastic analogy. Is so, our eyeballs are tuned to a certain frequency. It's something like 200 nanometers to 900 nanometers frequency, and your eyes pick up the signal, and your brain decodes it, and your consciousness interacts with it. Anyway, so you have that small band of frequency, but you also hear another band of frequency, and you can feel another band of frequency. I mean, when a bass, a subwoofer, you can feel that. I mean, so these are all just along a spectrum of like absolute stillness to quintillion repetition cycles per second. And the second part of his analogy is, so your eyes pick up the signal and your brain decodes it. Well, what about the Wi-Fi? That is, you can't see that, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, but you can open up your computer screen, and which is connected. You can open up your computer screen and type something in, and that will tune into the signal of the Wi-Fi, which is tuned into something over the World Wide Net, and literally have access to anything. And this is just one of my my own theories, is that as as human as all of us have grown over the years, I guess, progressed over the last 2,000 years. And you can tell they've been increased, the parasite class have been increasingly anxious and throwing all sorts of distractions and other things at us to kind of make sure that we don't go back into that natural state where we're in tune with the ether and everything. And so one of my just theories, I mean, you can never prove that it was true or false, is that those increases are proportional to what we would have been had they not thrown those technological changes at us. So like the internet, for instance, had they not given us the internet, would we be communicating with each other and just pulling all the information that we ever needed, like just straight out of the ether, instead of a phone pulling it straight out of the ether?
Mm.
And just to make sure that we don't ever, or that, to not make sure, because they won't make sure, we'll do it anyways, but to kind of hinder us from actually tuning into that. That's what I've always been curious of, because I think what you said is that there is a language in the ether, in just existence in itself. You just have to be able to tune into it. And there's so many
Yeah.
things trying to keep you, make sure you don't tune into it.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Like we are always tuned into that. And that's why many people at once can often come up with the same idea or have the same vision. It's because they call it the Akashic record, which is just where everything is stored. It's like a massive internet that you can tap into at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And the solutions are there, the answers are there, and memory is there, and future is there as well. It's all there. And I say the same thing. I mean, it's like the human body is a path of least resistance mechanism. So if you take in hormones, for example, your body won't create its own hormones. It'll take the path of least resistance. It'll take the easiest method.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can tap in your phone, you phone to tap onto Google and whatever else, it does take away your ability to access these other forms of information that are around us at all time, because that using the phone is the path of least resistance. And it's one of the reasons that I don't use maps. I don't use Google Maps. I still use a Refidex, or I follow my nose. I know the direction I'm going in, and I follow my nose. And it's like, and I remember when I went to Melbourne years ago, and I hired a car, and I didn't know where I was going. I just started driving, and just intuitively just managed. I got there. I got exactly where I needed to go, and I just like was, it just reminded me that we have this internal guidance. We are tapped into a GPS if we allow it. If we go to devices in the easiest path of least resistance, then we'll always not lose, but definitely switch off
Mm-hmm.
our innate abilities to do a lot of the things that we're letting technology do for us. And I think it's a big mistake.
Yeah, I mean, how do you have a chance meeting when you got nothing else left up to chance? You got your GPS on your phone. You know down to the second when your friend is going to meet you at this exact same spot, and you get in your Uber by yourself, and there you go. Like, no, I also stopped using maps and all of that stuff too recently, because that's really part of life, is getting lost and finding your way. I mean, like, that's
Yeah.
extremely fulfilling, and you get to learn about what's going on around you. And
Mm-hmm.
to keep along with that theme there, and you're a good guy to talk to about this, because I know you don't use you definitely distance yourself from the technology, the phone, the computer a lot. And I used to use it just as much as anybody else, and I've recently stopped. So I want to usually avoid analogies like this, but it's worth pointing out that language is basically the same thing as an operating system for our
Mm-hmm.
consciousness. And speaking of operating systems, especially recently, we have been interacting with each other through computers and phones. And almost rather, it's mainly like just ourselves going back and forth with a computer, and the other person, for some people, is almost completely phased out. So, anyway, just like language controls your entire reality, definitely your perception of reality, most don't realize how much their computer is controlling their minds either, limiting it, boxing it in. So, take for example your operating system on your phone. There's basically two options, two behemoths. There's more, but basically two for all intents and purposes. And if you're using Apple, it's pretty disconcerting to just up and switch to an Android. And then the reverse is also true. So it's the manner of expression, literally the language you use to communicate with the computer and the computer back to you. And so if it's such a huge difference to just pick up another phone and try and use that, like, what do you think it's doing to your mind? And then, yeah, Tom, since you have decent boundaries with technology, have you ever noticed this, that is a language controlling your mind?
Yeah, yeah. It's just a pattern. So the mind is it's literally like a computer that's programmed. You can put different maps in it, like all the time. A map just being an operating system. So you can take a modern engine in a car, same engine, nothing changes, but you put a different chip in that changes the way it reads fuel and air mixture, and then you've instantly got more power or better, different fuel economy or whatever. You just put a different map in it. So it learns how to use what it's using differently. It's always going to have air and fuel coming in. That's just, and it's got the same internals, but you can completely change the engine operates based on the engine management operating system. And so same with us, we're the same being, but the way we map our minds and our brains, which is like our computer, it's like we can operate completely differently from, and that's what MK Ultra is about. The mind control, the programming people to react to trigger words and to become operatives and things like that is just it's just a mind control. It's just a computer that you're programming a specific way to get a specific outcome. So that's why it's really important to become more masterful of yourself and not allowing all these external influences that you really don't know. Like you don't know what's encoded in the light that's coming out of a screen that you're looking at, or you don't know what's encoded in the water in your town water supply. Everything is encoded with frequency. And if you don't know what's in it, then you don't know what the result of that is going to be. So that's why a lot of people are operating within a very controlled construct, and a lot of their thoughts aren't theirs. A lot of their mannerisms aren't theirs. They're, it's just kind of it's a program. Their reactions in particular, the way people react to things, that's coming very much from where the ego lies, but still those reactions aren't necessarily, they're programmed reactions. It's only when people become much more self-aware and do enough of shedding of these external things to realize that they have control over how they act in life and not react. And that's one of the biggest parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even go a little bit further and say for those operating systems on your phone and your computer, the Windows, the Apple, the Google, Android, or whatever, they're not designed to help you be the best you. They're designed to control you, spy on you, make sure that you don't leave your box, track every single thing that you do, and add that to the equation of which they use against you, the equation with all the information and predictions to use against and to manipulate further. So there is a solution to that, and it's not even that hard. But I actually switched to Linux a while ago, maybe a year ago, and one of the best things I've ever done. Every time I have to get onto a regular computer, whether it's Apple or Windows for work or something, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And I'm sure there's stuff in Linux, but just the fact that it's like open source, people can double check into it. It's not solely built to track you and control you. I'm sure there's other aspects of it that are, but it's wild how it, for the most part, even though a lot of people are volunteers, it ends up working better than the other things. So I'd be happy to share that. It's definitely on my list of things that I suggest for people who want to kind of break their mind free of things that you don't even realize are holding your mind back. I mean, you wouldn't realize it unless you tried it. That's it. So, definitely something to mention there. And
well, that's interesting in that. Like I'm running Windows on this and I hate it. Like even when I installed Windows, I just didn't know that there was any other options. And like Windows, I'm like, man, I don't want to give Bill Gates any money. They go, I want him dead. Like, I don't want to support Windows, but it's like I didn't know at the time any options. And then, the Linux stuff is interesting. I just don't have any knowledge of computers.
Yeah,
like
it's really not that hard to do. Like you can look up a tutorial that's on one single page on the internet, and it'll get you there. The only problem usually is trying to fight Windows to let go of the hard drive and everything. Yeah. But I mean, that stuff, I get on it for work, and I'm like, this is not designed to work whatsoever. It's just like designed to slow you down. It's just every single time I get on there. So I send you some stuff for that, and maybe I'll post that in the link, something to get people onto Linux. And then I even, with my phone, like it's a ROM version of Android. So that's like, it's just like they took the Android version and they coded it themselves. they use
Mhm.
some of the stuff, but there's no Google stuff on the phone. So a lot of
Right.
stuff actually doesn't work, but it's really fine because I don't need that Google
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
and with people with all the contact tracing stuff going on the phones, and everybody's like, oh, how do I turn it off and this and that, and I've used my girlfriend's phone, and I'm like, there's all these ads telling her to get a test and get voted and whatever and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you put up with that on something that you're supposed to like own and control completely?
Mm.
Telling you to go out and do something and get tested. So yeah, I'll post that in the description here.
Yeah, put it in the description of the video. Because once this is up, I'll just download it off your channel and I'll copy the description, like whatever links in that you put in, and I'll put it on mine as well, so
Cool.
people can get that kind of stuff.
Yeah, will do. And the only thing I had on here, I mean, we wanted to talk about more about solutions that with the assemblies. This is the people assembling and coming into what they were supposed to do from the beginning. I know we mentioned it last time. I think we'll probably have to do another one that's only that. And in fact, I
Yeah.
might ask somebody to join me to that's a little bit more versed in exactly the origins of it and everything. So, but that's going good, and yeah, I'll post links for that in there.
Yeah,
There's
cool.
like Tom had mentioned, there you can do the get your record of live birth, but there's also different versions of affidavits and other ways. And on the American States Assembly, they have that full package. Like you can do everything. They provide everything on there. So it's not going to get you your record of live birth, but it is the affidavits and the recording and also the other witnesses to kind of attest to that. So there's definitely a lot going up. I see. There's a lot going on there. So,
Cool. Yeah, that's cool.
and I had
But,
one.
well, with that, we'll do another show on that because we've got a common law court assembly happening up here in about 3 weeks. So that'll be cool. I could give you some information on that as well, how that goes.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I'd love to get that information. And I was curious if I could maybe see if some of the we'll just say the OGs, if I could convince them to do an interview with you and kind of go back and forth on
Yeah,
the
cool.
OGs over here in America. So
Yeah,
like the marks over here in America. So I'll
yeah,
send some emails, see what I can put together. Um,
yeah, cool.
I did have one question. It's just my own curiosity.
Yeah,
That's off topic with the food thing. So I'm looking into with my own food, like we're eating raw, not all the time. Like I said, I'm not trying to like get into one hole where I have to eat this way, but
yeah,
I know with raw there's a lot more nutrients in there, and plus it's a lot easier. Like I'm just like kind of sick of cooking sometimes. But
yeah.
what do you do? So I heard you mention raw meat. I eat rare meat. So what do you do with raw meat?
Just eat it.
I mean, like, so what kinds of meat? Like beef?
So you can eat any meat raw. There's no meat you can't eat raw. It's all the same. So, but the meat that I eat the most of is beef and fish. I used to eat a lot of chicken, and I just haven't been eating a lot of chicken recently. But it's only because your body goes through different phases.
Mm-hmm.
Your body wants different things. Every kind of meat can have its really good points and its really bad points if you overdo it. So it's just a matter of yeah, really listening to your body, seeing what your body wants, looking for the reactions in the body, how you're handling things. But basically, with red meats, I just eat them as they are. I chop them, and sometimes I don't even really chew them that much. I might chew them a couple of times and swallow chunks of it because meats don't digest until it meets the stomach and the small intestine. It's only carbohydrates that digest in the mouth, which is why you got to chew a lot when you're eating carbohydrate rich foods because you're mixing your amylase, which is the
Mm-hmm.
enzyme that breaks down sugars, and starches and things start digesting in the mouth. But meats and that all just they got to go down there before they start digesting anywhere. And because they have their own enzymes in them and they're very easy to digest, they break down very quickly. So if you want to make them more flavorsome, you can make sauces out of different things, usually cream, eggs, some herbs, some spices, things like that, like blend that sort of stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And olive oil mixed with things. You know, you can make sauces for it, make it really flavorsome. And when it's white meats like chicken, you know, and your fish, things like that, you can do ceviche with that, which is where you cure it in lemon juice. So you squeeze 4 lemons, something like that,
Yeah.
and slice or chop your meat, and then just cure it in that for a couple of hours. You can also put things like chili, pepper, olive oil, herbs in there, and whatever as well, and it'll infuse into the meat, and you get a really
Mm.
tasty dish. So lots of different ways.
Yeah, no, I've eaten plenty of raw fish. I mean, just having a salmon fillet by itself is one of my favorite things to eat. But yeah, I guess I had never even. It's just one of those things. It's like language. Like I never even considered this until like I heard you talking about it. Like, oh, we're never supposed to do that. Just no questions asked. Don't eat meat raw. Like end of story. And I'm like, well, I don't know why I just went along with that and never questioned it. Well, I guess because no one got me to question it. Now I questioned it, and that's a good. Well, I'll let you know how it goes. and
Yeah.
and then do you know anything about smoking too? Like, have you found that kills removes a lot of the nutrients? Do you have any opinion on that? Smoking of meats?
Yeah, well, smoke by itself is not really good for the body. Like I know a lot of cultures do smoke things like tobacco and chocolate and you know, different hallucinogens and whatever. People smoke stuff, and it's not going to kill you, but it's not the best thing for the body. So smoked meats to cure them, um, I'll just say that it's not. There's nothing that's all bad and all good. So I don't. I think if it's an option for you, you can look at it. But smoke is always it's harmful to the body.
Hmm.
Smoke itself. So me personally, I don't eat any smoked meats. I don't have a taste for smoked meats for one. There's something about the smoke that I definitely do. I do know when it enters my body that smoked anything is not for me.
Hmm.
Other people, not so much. So I think you just got to. We all have a different constitution, and for some people, the smoke could be all right. You know, I think the better way to cure meats is to just air dry them, to hang dry them, and to make high meats and things like that. They're my preferred ways to. Then you got months and months out of the meat,
Hmm.
like high meat, months and months.
What's
Cured
that?
meat, like as in air dried, months and months. You've got a long time.
So what's high meat? Just
High meat is when it's you basically just put meat in a jar. You chop it up into like small cubes, put it
mm-hmm.
into a jar. You want equal amount of meat to air. So like if a jar is like this big, it is
Mm-hmm.
halfway filled with meat. You don't fill it all the way up or too low because of the bacterial changes that go on. So what happens is you put chunks of meat in a jar, you put it in the fridge. 4 days later, you take it out, open the lid, air it out, and then put the lid back on, put it back in the fridge. I've done this burying it in the garden as well. You don't have to use a fridge and you would air it out more frequently. So the reason you do that is that the bacteria goes through various cycles and changes. And then when you keep adding fresh air, it goes through another aerobic cycle of its,
Hmm.
of its changes. So it's anaerobic and then it goes aerobic, then anaerobic, then aerobic. So you do that every 4 days. You take it out and air it, and you just keep doing that for the duration, and it will last. After about 6 to 8 cycles, it becomes a full spectrum probiotic, and then later, as it gets higher and higher, it just becomes more and more pre-digested. So you're eating pre-digested meat. It stinks. It's really stinky, but it's been used in many cultures to raise spirits, like it boosts mood. It gives you a lot of beneficial bacteria, and it's pre-digested meat, which means it's extremely bioavailable. And
And you
yeah,
can do
it's
that for
just
months. You can
you can
have
do
it.
that for as long as you want. Eventually, it'll turn pretty much to liquid, but that takes a long time. Like I've got some in my fridge at the moment that I'm going through that's been in there for literally months, and it's still just like steak. It's just darker,
Mm.
and it's quite easy to eat
And
actually.
and then the hanging, you said you leave it out in the open air constantly.
Yeah, yeah. You can cover it as well, just so that flies and that. But generally, you do that in colder climates that it just doesn't get flies coming straight on it and laying maggots into it and all that sort of stuff. So you
Yeah.
generally, but even having said that, there's plenty of cultures that eat maggot-ridden food because the maggots are actually have pre-digested some of the food and they're a very good food source themselves. So yeah, there's not when you start looking into what natural living cultures and tribes do, it's almost like would make you gag because in our modern Western society, we're taught that germs are bad and you don't eat things that are insects and you know, anything that gets moldy or rotten, you throw it out. And we live in this very over sanitized clinical world that is in no way connected to nature. So then you
Right.
go and watch people who are highly connected to nature. They eat maggots, ants, flies, lots of insects. They eat molded foods. They eat high meats. And it's like for our Western indoctrination, we just go, ugh, like
Right.
could never eat that. You know, other cultures drink their urine, and other cultures they eat feces. They eat the droppings of herbivores, not other humans or whatever, but herbivores, because that's just pre-digested plant matter with a lot of bacteria in it, and it can really help to boost bowel function. So things like buffalo dung, you know, cow dung, things like that. People eat that stuff.
Hmm.
And in our culture, we go, "Oh, you eat shit. Oh my god, you're gross." But it's not really gross. They're actually really, really, really healthy,
Yeah.
and very in tune and connected to nature. And we in our society are so disconnected from nature that we call that gross.
Right. And not only are they surviving, because sometimes you kind of have to do stuff like that with the high meats and you get through the winter and all that. So they're doing that
Yeah,
to survive, but they're also thriving because it seems that that's actually healthier than the sanitized world that we live in. So it's
yeah,
like a win-win. And honestly, that's what I'm curious about in case anything happens with food is I want to like just kind of have an idea of how traditionally that it's gone, and so I'm looking into stuff like that, but you know it's far and few between to try and figure it out. But I live on a horse ranch, so there's horses, so
yeah.
the horse poop.
Yeah. Well, there's, yeah, I mean, and things like that too, that was traditionally done ceremonially. Usually, like a cow or something or a horse was taken once a month or something, you know, under a full moon and done ceremonially. And no, nothing in the animal was spared, you
Well, I
know?
meant that I didn't mean killing the horse. I meant like the
Oh,
horse crap, like you were talking about with the dung.
oh, right. Yeah.
That's free. Hey, just go out to the yard, man.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, if it comes to whatever it comes to, I mean, people got to do what they got to do. But right,
Yeah.
yeah, and well, cool. I think that'll about do it. This was
Good.
fun, man.
Yeah.
Let's do it again for sure.
Yeah. We'll do another.
Is there anything else you wanted to leave with?
Um, to leave with, yeah, I mean, I think we covered some really good territory today, but I think the main thing I think for people to take away is to become your own, just become your own being. You know, I keep talking about it in different ways. And what happens is I think that we're like, if you imagine a diamond and if it's fragmented and it's just always just throwing off things in different directions and it's not this unified field, then it can never be as powerful as it's meant to be. So when you stop kind of like letting things fritter or out with not knowing what you're saying and not, you know, not knowing what you're exposing yourself to, just those two things, that can unify this field that you have, this diamond, make it really solid and really bright. And then that's kind of like your internal thing. And then that internal diamond really can project such power into the world, but also to be very, very protective for your inner self and your outer self as well. And I think that's one of the things that if people just focus more on that, they wouldn't have as many worries about anything in the world, and they'll always be pretty well taken care of. And there are many benefits to that. So it's literally just a case of being more conscious and aware of what you're putting out into the world, and more conscious and aware of what you're allowing to come into you via the various mediums of information, and being very selective about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I We're more powerful if you live up to your full potential, like you're talking about, and you let that diamond be. I mean, you're more powerful just you than all of the parasitic class combined. Just
Mm.
one, I say. And yeah, you're right. That's why I wanted to talk about language. I actually had a lot more other topics, but I knew they would just take so long. But I wanted to talk about balancing things and the mind, body, spirit, and um, mentalism, how what's in your head you manifest out to the world, like literally, not it's not a figuratively, it's not a metaphor, that's literally what happens. So we want to do that again sometime. We can jump into another one of those terms, but
Yeah.
even an hour is not enough to even like get started with balance and all of those threads. So but we'll
Yeah.
definitely do it again. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and oh, just uh, just to say, for your information and anyone else who's paying attention, I definitely am changing the name of what I'm doing. So I thought American States News was, it just sounds too like corporate. My idea was, to kind of bring a few people together, but it doesn't work with what I want to do right now. And so I actually have another name, another thing that I've been wanting to do. So I'm going to use the conversations on land for like, this is conversations on land. I like that. And I had the website's going to be livingon.land. So I'm just going to
Hmm.
call it living on land. So
Nice.
basically just like any and everything. It's not exclusive to law or anything like that. Just, any and everything of someone trying to live on land and, like I said, be in control of what they absorb and what they put out to the world. And that's it. And I have a van that I'm going to, put a bed in and everything and just
Yep.
do living on land, whatever comes out of that. That's it.
Cool. Have you registered that one already?
The van?
Make sure you register
Oh,
register
no,
it.
no. No. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I own that URL.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say like make sure you do it before you air this in case somebody somebody puts gets it before you do.
No, no, I have it. I have a few. I didn't realize that dot land was a thing, and I have a few
I
good
didn't know
ones.
either.
I have a few good
Ah,
ones. If you want to look at them, we could
yeah,
share.
right.
I'll send you the list. All
Yeah,
right, man.
cool.
Well, cool, man. We'll talk to you soon, and yeah, I'm gonna rebrand everything and redirect the website and all that stuff, and kind of change the tone of it. But I think it'll be a lot more laid back for just me, and then
Yeah, for
anyone else who
sure.
wants to join in. And
Yeah.
and
Well, mine's almost ready too. I've got that tombarnett.tv. That's almost ready to go up. Like the mailing list is already like ready, so people have got on can go there and go on the mailing list, and then that site's pretty much ready now. So another week or so, and we'll have the content going on there. So it's pretty good. Like I think getting a private site's the way to go because it just totally takes out Google and Facebook and YouTube and all the
mm-hmm.
other things. Just having a private site I think is really important.
Yeah, no, it is. The only thing I've heard though is the bandwidth for videos is expensive. But
Yeah,
if you can
but
figure out,
yeah. So what I'm doing is I paid for a pro membership on Vimeo, and
okay,
then Vimeo hosts all the videos, and then they embed into your site. And because you pay for the service on Vimeo, there's no yeah, they're just there, and they don't have like Vimeo branding or anything on it because you pay for it. It's like $70 a month or something, but it's that has all your hosting then for the videos.
cool. Yeah, well there you go. Yeah, you got something figured out then, and yeah, you're welcome to use anything of mine on there. That's fine too, because I'm not doing it
Yeah,
for
cool.
profit. I'm kind of just doing it for just to
Yeah,
do it the right thing. I don't know.
yeah,
We'll see what
yeah,
else comes out of it. I'm fine with it. So.
yeah.
All right, man. Cheers.
Cool.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you soon. All
Thanks,
right.
man. Talk to you
Yep.
soon.